Most men think attraction grows when things move forward, when it becomes clearer, more physical, more obvious. But what if I told you that clarity is exactly what kills desire? That the moment a woman feels she has you fully figured out, something inside her quietly shuts down. You may not notice it right away. She'll still smile, still respond. But the pull is gone. And the men who trigger the strongest attraction aren't the ones who escalate fastest. They're the ones who slow everything down, the ones who don't rush her nervous system into certainty. If you've ever wondered why she seemed more drawn to you before anything happened, this is why. Attraction doesn't respond to contact. It responds to tension. And once you understand how tension actually forms, you stop chasing chemistry and start controlling it. Most men were taught, directly or indirectly, that attraction is something you do to a woman. You escalate, you flirt harder, you get closer, you touch. And if she doesn't respond, you assume you didn't do enough. That belief alone has quietly sabotaged more men than rejection ever could. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Physical touch is not the engine of attraction. It's a multiplier. It only amplifies what already exists. And when there's nothing underneath, touch doesn't create desire. It exposes the absence of it. This is why you see the same pattern repeat. The man who rushes to escalate becomes predictable, transparent, easy to read. And once a woman can fully read you, there's nothing left for her nervous system to lean into. No tension, no mystery, no pull. A woman's attraction doesn't ignite from stimulation. It ignites from anticipation. Her nervous system is far more responsive to what might happen than what's already happening. That's why the moments that affect her most aren't physical at all. They're psychological, emotional, subtle. When a man touches her too soon, too eagerly, it sends a message beneath the surface. I need a reaction from you to feel secure. And that message kills attraction faster than silence ever could. This is where most men get it backwards. They think touch creates closeness. In reality, closeness is what earns touch. Without that foundation, physical contact feels hollow, sometimes even intrusive, no matter how polite or well-intentioned it looks on the outside. Here's the line most men aren't ready to hear, but need to. If she needs to be touched to feel something, you were never the cause of the feeling. Attraction that lasts doesn't start on her skin. It starts in her mind, in the way her body reacts before anything happens, in the way she becomes more aware of you even when you're not speaking, in the quiet tension that forms when nothing obvious is being done. That's why some men don't need to chase, escalate, or prove anything. Their presence alone shifts the dynamic. Not because they're trying, but because they're not. And this is where the real work begins. Because once you stop trying to do attraction to her, you can start understanding what actually makes her feel it. And it starts with something far more powerful than touch. Most men believe they're giving attention when, in reality, they're asking for approval. They compliment, they agree, they react quickly. They lean forward emotionally before she ever does. And then they're confused when she slowly disengages, even though they were so attentive. Here's the distinction that changes everything. Attention is not validation. Real attention is presence. Validation is cheap. It's reactive. It says, tell me who to be so I don't lose you. Presence, on the other hand, is grounded. It doesn't chase her emotions. It observes them. And that difference is exactly why women respond so strongly to it. Most men look at women on the surface level. They notice her appearance, her social role, the version of herself she presents to the world. Very few men slow down enough to notice how she thinks, why she reacts the way she does, or what she reveals in the quiet spaces between her words. That's why feeling seen hits so deep for a woman. Because it's rare. When you genuinely pay attention, not to impress her, not to score points, but to understand her, you signal something her nervous system recognizes immediately. Safety without submission. This is where attraction starts to take shape. It's not about interrogating her or memorizing facts like a checklist. It's about noticing patterns, remembering small details without announcing that you remembered them, picking up on the things she mentions casually and revisiting them later without effort or expectation. And most importantly, it's about listening without rehearsing your response. When a woman feels that you're not waiting for your turn to speak, when she senses that you're actually absorbing her perspective, her emotional defenses begin to soften, not because you're doing anything impressive, but because you're doing something unfamiliar. You're not trying to be liked. That alone separates you from the crowd. Here's what most men don't realize. The moment a woman feels psychologically seen, her body relaxes. And when her body relaxes, attraction has room to grow. There's no pressure, no performance, no need to impress. That's why she remembers you later. Not because of what you said, but because of how she felt being herself around you. And this is where many men sabotage themselves. They confuse attention with availability. They overdo it. They stay constantly engaged. They respond too fast. They make her the emotional center of their focus. Too much attention collapses tension. When she never has to wonder where she stands with you, there's nothing left for her mind to explore. No space for desire to stretch. This is the turning point. Attention creates attraction, but only when it's paired with restraint. If you give it away freely, it loses its weight. If you offer it selectively, it becomes intoxicating. And that's where the balance begins to shift. Because once she feels seen, but not chased, she starts leaning in on her own. And that's when desire stops being something you try to create and starts becoming something she invests in. Attraction doesn't grow in comfort. It grows in resistance. And this is where many men misinterpret what challenge actually means. They hear phrases like playing hard to get and assume it's about being cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. That's not challenge. That's confusion. Real challenge isn't about pulling away. It's about not collapsing toward her. When a man removes all friction, always available, always agreeable, always accommodating, he removes the very tension that makes attraction possible. There's no mystery left. No space for curiosity. No reason for her nervous system to stay alert. Women don't respond to men who are easy to access emotionally. They respond to men whose attention has weight. This is where standards quietly change everything. A man with standards doesn't announce them. He lives them. He doesn't rush to rearrange his life because she's suddenly free. He doesn't drop his plans to prove interest. He doesn't over-explain when something doesn't work for him. And here's the psychological shift that happens when you do this correctly. She starts adjusting herself. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior communicates value without asking for validation. Scarcity of attention activates reciprocal interest. When your time isn't guaranteed, it becomes something to earn. That's not manipulation. That's polarity. A woman invests emotionally where effort is required. When you stop chasing, she starts engaging. She wonders where she stands. She becomes more present, more aware, more intentional. And this is the truth most men avoid. A man without standards trains a woman to disrespect him, not overtly, not cruelly, but subtly, through loss of tension, through emotional familiarity, through the quiet realization that he'll always be there, no matter how little she invests. Challenge restores balance. It says, I'm interested, but I'm not for everyone. It says, I enjoy you, but my life doesn't orbit you. It says, you don't get unlimited access just because you're attractive. That restraint does something powerful. It forces her to show up differently, to bring more of herself into the interaction, to invest rather than evaluate. And once she invests, even slightly, the dynamic changes. Attraction deepens because now she has something at stake. This is where desire starts to move on its own. No pressure, no performance, no chasing. But challenge alone isn't enough. Once tension exists, it needs direction. And that direction comes through how you speak, how you pause, and how you let words do less work than your presence. Because once she's leaning in emotionally, your voice becomes the catalyst that turns curiosity into craving. Once attraction has tension, words stop being information. They become influence. Most men talk too much when they're nervous. They rush. They explain. They fill silence because silence feels risky. But to a woman's nervous system, silence handled well is one of the strongest signals of control there is. Tone matters more than content because tone reveals your internal state. A rushed voice signals anxiety. A performative voice signals need. But a calm, grounded, unhurried voice signals something rare: self-regulation. And self-regulation is deeply attractive. When a man speaks slowly, with intention, he isn't trying to impress. He's allowing his words to land. That subtle restraint tells her, I'm not here to win you over. I'm here because I choose to be. Pauses do more than silence ever could. A pause creates anticipation. It gives her nervous system time to lean forward, to wonder, to fill in the space. And when she fills in the space herself, she becomes emotionally involved. That's why the most effective lines aren't clever. They're open-ended. Compare the difference. You're interesting. Versus, there's something about you, and I'm still figuring out what it is. One closes the loop. The other opens it. Suggestive language isn't about flirting harder. It's about saying less and implying more. It hints instead of declares. It invites curiosity rather than delivering conclusions. When you speak this way, you're not placing her on a pedestal. You're creating a shared moment she wants to explore. And here's the mistake that ruins it: over-flirting. Too many compliments flatten tension. Too much verbal interest removes mystery. When everything is expressed, nothing is felt. Attraction thrives in what's unsaid. This is what mental foreplay actually looks like. You let conversations breathe. You allow moments to stretch. You don't rush toward certainty. If she asks about your weekend, you don't deliver a detailed summary. You leave a thread hanging. Not to manipulate, but because your life doesn't need to be unpacked on demand. That subtle restraint activates something powerful. Her mind starts working. She becomes curious. She wonders. And curiosity is the doorway to desire. Here's the key most men miss. When you're comfortable with pauses, she feels safe inside them. Silence handled poorly feels awkward. Silence handled well feels intimate, and intimacy without touch is often more powerful than touch itself. As your words slow down, something else becomes louder. Your presence, your stillness, your eyes. Because once the talking stops, the real communication begins. And that's where attraction shifts from being something you say to something she feels without understanding why. There's a moment, usually brief, where words stop working, and most men panic when they reach it. They look away, they fill the space, they laugh, they retreat back into conversation because silence feels exposed. But that moment is exactly where attraction either deepens or disappears. Eye contact, when done right, is not aggressive. It's revealing. That's why it's so powerful. When you hold someone's gaze calmly, without tension in your face or hunger in your expression, you're doing something most people avoid. You're allowing yourself to be seen without asking for reassurance. And that level of comfort communicates confidence more clearly than any words ever could. Women are acutely sensitive to this, not consciously, but neurologically. Direct eye contact triggers vulnerability. It activates presence, and presence tells her nervous system, this man is grounded. He's not trying to escape this moment. But here's where men go wrong. They turn eye contact into a stare. Staring is forceful. It's rigid. It tries to dominate. Real attraction comes from a soft gaze, relaxed eyes, steady attention, subtle warmth. You're not locking onto her. You're inviting her in. When she's speaking, you stay with her. Not intermittently, not performatively, fully. You let her feel that, in this moment, she has your attention, but not your submission. And then comes the shift. When the conversation slows and the space opens, you hold eye contact just a second longer than usual, not to intimidate, not to test her, simply long enough for tension to form naturally. If she looks away first, something important has happened. Her nervous system felt it. And if she looks back to check whether you're still there, and sees that you are, that's when the connection locks in. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. This is silent dominance, not control over her, but control over yourself. The man who can hold eye contact without urgency, without expectation, without needing a response, sends a message beneath the surface. I don't need anything from you right now. That message is rare, and rarity creates value. Here's the truth. Most men never practice long enough to learn. The man who can hold silence can hold her attention. Because silence handled with presence feels intimate. It feels intentional. It feels safe. And safety combined with tension is where attraction takes root. Most men never reach this point because they rush. They interrupt the moment. They break eye contact too soon because they're afraid of feeling exposed. But when you stay, calm, relaxed, unreactive, you give her something unfamiliar, a space where nothing needs to happen, yet everything feels charged. And once you understand this, you start to see why so many men fail without knowing why. Because the final barrier to attraction isn't technique, it's self-control. Attraction was never about a single move. It was never about saying the right thing at the right time or executing some perfect sequence. Attraction is a process, and most men fail because they try to rush it. Impatience is the first mistake. When a man needs clarity too soon, he kills tension. When he needs reassurance, he exposes insecurity. When he needs results, he starts performing. And performance is the opposite of presence. Neediness doesn't always look desperate. Sometimes it looks polite, attentive, overly considerate, but underneath it carries the same message. I'm afraid of losing you. And fear is felt instantly, even when it's never spoken. The second failure is emotional attachment without self-control. Many men invest before anything is earned. They imagine futures, assign meaning, and emotionally commit while she's still observing. That imbalance creates pressure, and pressure suffocates attraction. The third failure is the deepest one, fear of loss. Fear makes men overcorrect. It makes them talk too much, give too much, stay too available. It makes them abandon their standards quietly, one compromise at a time. And the moment a man abandons himself to keep a woman, attraction begins to erode. Here's the reframe that changes everything. When you control yourself, she loses control of her emotions. Not because you manipulate her, but because your restraint creates safety, tension, and curiosity at the same time. Your calm becomes a stabilizing force. Your boundaries give structure. Your presence invites her nervous system to respond naturally, without force. That's why attraction doesn't need touch. It needs self-respect. Self-respect shows up as patience, as silence that doesn't beg to be filled, as attention that isn't handed out for free, as standards that don't need to be defended. When you stop trying to extract attraction from her, you become the kind of man attraction moves toward on its own. And this is the quiet truth most men never hear. Women don't pull away because you didn't do enough. They pull away because you did too much, too soon, without grounding. Attraction grows where there's space to grow, where effort isn't forced, where presence isn't transactional. And once you understand that, you stop chasing reactions and start creating conditions. Conditions where attraction doesn't need to be touched to be felt. Attraction was never meant to be forced, and it was never meant to be chased. The moment you understand this, You stop exhausting yourself trying to create desire and start becoming the kind of man desire responds to naturally. Touch is cheap. Anyone can reach out. Anyone can escalate. Anyone can try to take. Presence is rare, and rarity is what creates value. The men who struggle the most with attraction aren't lacking effort. They're lacking restraint. They confuse intensity with depth. They mistake availability for connection. And in doing so, they give away the very thing that makes them attractive in the first place. The most compelling men aren't the ones who try hardest. They're the ones who don't need to prove anything. They can sit in silence without anxiety. They can give attention without chasing. They can walk away without resentment. And because they don't grasp, women lean in. This is the shift that changes everything. When you stop chasing her body, her mind starts chasing you. Not because you manipulated her, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. Attraction doesn't begin on the skin. It begins in the nervous system, where calm, grounded, self-respecting men leave the deepest imprint. If this perspective challenged you, let it. Growth isn't comfortable, but it is clarifying. Subscribe if you want to understand female psychology without losing your edge or your self-respect. Like this video if you're done playing the old attraction game that never worked. And comment if you've ever realized, too late, that doing more wasn't the answer. This isn't about tricks, it's about control. And the man who controls himself controls the dynamic.